beginning of the year, which is really just about what our year wants to be like. And every year we have to set some goals. Mine has never been about my badge or opportunities or anything like that, because it's really not in my control. Like there's no way I can give myself a game or say I'm going to umpire this game this week or I'm going to get my IUA next or anything like that, because realistically there's nothing I can do aside from worry about my own performance to put myself in the best position to be selected for those opportunities. But ultimately, they're the sorts of things that you can't control. So whilst having a badge is really nice, and it's exciting when you get those opportunities, and there's a lot of self-validation that you can get from that, ultimately the players don't give a shit. Kelsey certainly doesn't care that I'm a badge because she just wants to make sure that I do the right thing when I'm umpiring. And that's ultimately what the bottom line is, that you want to give your best performance when you are there, but she probably wouldn't even know what sort of badge I have as an athlete. And nor would I expect her to either, because that's not sort of the relationship that you would have with a player. It's all about what you present to them and how fair you are and your understanding of the game, the way you communicate and the rapport that you build with them. For me, that's the ultimate. That's why I umpire. So
yeah.
Can I just interject in that? Sorry.
Sure.
And just say that it definitely, like, probably just to validate your point, it does not matter. To me, I have had some of the best umpires that probably haven't been graded, and I've had no idea, but I've remembered their name because of the way that they've umpired, if you understand what I mean, and the rapport that they've built and exactly what you said. So I don't want to say that I don't care, but I feel like, you know, it is your personal style, and it's, I don't know.
Yeah. Timmy, what about you in terms of how long you stayed on each badge before you progressed through?
Well, I actually started umpiring really, really late. So I think I didn't get my C badge until I was maybe 22 or something like that. And that was just purely because I was more interested in playing and didn't care about umpiring at all back then. So I got my C badge in Queensland, and I sat on that for, I think it was only about 1.5 years to 2 years, because at that time I was more interested in umpiring than playing, I suppose. So had it for about 1.5 to 2 years, got my B in Queensland, and then I sat on that for about 5 years, I think, possibly even 6. And then, much like James, the way that Queensland was set up was different nights had different competitions. It wasn't like Victoria where a state league was all on one night. So I was, like I mentioned at the start, I was doing a Mount Franklin Cup, which is, you know, not the highest division by a long shot back then, and wasn't even getting like great games back then. Moved to Victoria, and was in VNL for a couple of years before I even started to move up divisions there. And was in Victoria for 2 years, I think, and then got my A. And then from there, I progressed through the emerging talent and the Netball Australia pathway pretty quickly, similar to James. I think mine was only about 2 years from A to AA, but the support in the programs that I had from Netball Australia and Netball Vic, I think they were the things that really propelled me very quickly. But having said that, I was only umpiring Division 1 and 19s right up until I got my A badge. So I think I'd done 2 championship games, which is our highest division in Victoria. Then got tested for my A. So I wasn't even on the top division for that long before I got tested. And that was just purely because of the strength of the umpiring that we have here in Victoria, and all of those umpires that were on court.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and look, in terms of the strength of netball in Victoria, I think every state is going to say that their state is strong, or probably the strongest. At the end of the day, I think we're lucky in the state that we live in. We do have a lot of depth, and like other states too, but we are super lucky with the standard of our umpires in that Victorian Netball League competition.
Yeah, and I think just on that, Greg, sorry, just quickly on that, I think, you know, we're very lucky to have the amount of like SSN umpires in Victoria, because, you know, we can work quite closely, and, you know, the other umpires that are coming through can kind of, you know, watch what we do and, you know, things like that. And that's what I was doing when I was coming through. No matter where I was, Queensland or Victoria, I was always, you know, looking at what people above me were doing and kind of what I aspired to be, to try and, you know, develop myself that way. It wasn't just all about, you know, on-court umpiring stuff.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I think that's a good addition to that too, because there is a lot of mentoring that happens, and that natural aspiration, I think, netball is improving as a sport. It's improving in so many different areas. We're expecting our athletes to be able to do a lot more, and Kelsey will probably talk to you about that in a second. We're expecting our coaches to develop a whole lot more, and now umpires are taking that on themselves and saying, right, I've got to be better too, because if I don't improve, then I'm going to get left behind. And I think that's what you both provide at VNL level, is the ability for younger umpires, or even umpires that are maybe of a lower badge, to aspire to what you have achieved. Kels, I'm going to go to you. Let's talk about ISO, because we are living in isolation at the moment. You spoke about being home in Geelong. What is life like? You're in rehab, you're in ISO. What is a day look like for Kelsey Brown?
So for me, I've tried to keep as much routine as possible, because let's be honest, I'm a sports person and that's how I live my life. I feel like I've spent the last 6 years having sort of my schedule dictated to me, and all of a sudden I've got this spare time and I don't know what to do with it. So I've tried to keep to a schedule as much as possible. So most mornings I'll get up and I'll train, because we train of a morning, so I'll try and stick to that. I've been relatively good, and I'm actually finding ISO so easy. I don't know whether that means that I don't like people, or I don't know, but I'm trying to stick to a schedule. I'm doing uni at the moment. Maddie and I have started this little business where we're talking to young netballers. I've had a lot of those phone calls in the last week. So I actually feel like I'm so busy at the moment, and probably achieving a lot more than I would have if I was training. Because I feel like a lot of the time we go to training and I finish at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and pretend that I've got nothing else to do. So for me, ISO life is great. I'm really happy. I'm obviously with my family, and I've been lucky enough to raid the Collingwood gym and set up a home gym in our garage, and that is making rehab life much easier. I will admit that I was quite stressed probably for a couple of weeks, not knowing how that was going to look. Because I think, and this is probably a question that people, I don't know whether people have asked, but I think people just assume that I've obviously bought myself more time for my recovery, which is, yes, true, but also I was getting to a point where I was having to tick off particular milestones, and now that we aren't in a team environment, I actually can't do that. So as much as I'm buying more time for my graft and for my hamstring tendon to turn into a ligament and actually restructure into an ACL, and I am buying time in that, and I'm working on my strength and everything that I need to, I'm sort of just coasting at the moment because I can't do contested work. So for my rehab, it's a little bit interesting, and it's just sort of wait and see. So everyone's like, oh, you'll definitely be back for round 1, but it could essentially mean, we don't really know what it looks like. So yeah, ISO's just been getting my head around that, getting my head around, not going into training every single day, but trying to keep a schedule. And I feel like in my head, I'm quite positive about what's to come.
Great, yeah, and just listening to you in terms of the milestones, having spent a lot of time playing men's netball at top level, and have a medical file that's deep as well, which is it is those small milestones are so important in your rehab, and it is interesting to hear you talk about finding a regular routine, because I guess if you look at the psychology of it, just the rehab process, but now being in isolation is adding that additional challenge. So to hear you've got your own little gym set up and you've got things into a Kelsey routine is awesome. And I think that's probably not what people would have expected to hear in terms of having more time on your hands, but really there's a bit of pros and cons to the situation, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think everyone who has gone into isolation, and I can talk probably on behalf of my team, we've had some people who have handled it super well. And that's not like a positive or a negative. They've just transitioned okay and probably developed different routines. And then we've had some that have really struggled. And that probably comes down to they haven't got the space to set up a home gym. And when you're an athlete who has trained 3 to 4 weight sessions a week normally, when you've got that taken away from you and you're not doing core work, like it obviously does have a massive impact on your mental health. So yeah, we've been checking in heaps as a team and even as a collective group in SSN, which I think is another thing that people are finding quite interesting. So I literally had one at 4 p.m. tonight, and we discussed like things as an entire SSN group. So there's, you know, over 80 people on the phone call. And yeah, it's just really good where it feels a lot more like a community, and we would never normally do that. So it's bringing out things that, yeah, is exciting for netball and good for the community. And sorry, I wanted to mention before off that we're obviously having a lot of stakeholder meetings at the moment about, you know, what the season's going to look like for 2020, if there is a season, XYZ. And I think it's important to note that coaches, CEOs, board members, players, umpires are all really equal stakeholders and have as equal say. So they are all represented in the meetings that are happening at the moment, which I find super exciting and feels like we are a very big community that is made up of different sectors that are super important for us to function.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, let's go back to James and Tim. I want to go pre-COVID time. Let's go back to season 2019 for you, because that's probably a little bit more of a normal example that you can give us. Lots of the questions were around how do you juggle everything, working full time, traveling, fitting things in. What does it look like, you know, in the very heart of the SSN season? How do you guys manage travel and training and work and the like?
Sometimes I don't, to be honest. I think it's really difficult for umpires to juggle everything like that, and it really just comes down to making sure that you know, you have really good structure around what you're doing week in, week out, and knowing what you have to achieve each week. For us, so we get allocations on a Tuesday afternoon for the weekend coming. So we've only got a few days to prepare for that weekend coming to where we're going. You know, we could be flying out on a Friday night, or, you know, on a Saturday, getting home at midnight on a Sunday. And I find it quite challenging sometimes, especially once we're halfway through the season, because I start to get obviously really exhausted from, you know, traveling every weekend almost, getting up at 8:30 to go to work on a Monday morning, as well as fitting in everything that we have to do around that with our fitness. You know, we try to get to team trainings as much as we possibly can. But then we also have another whole side of it, which is the review process. And for, you know, it varies for different umpires, but sometimes it can take me up to, you know, 5 hours just to do review of one game. And then from that, you know, we always have a catch up with the umpire coach that was there on the day. And if the teams have any queries, they're allowed to send queries through to Netball Australia that they forward on to us that we have to answer. So it becomes very hectic. And I think, you know, it's just making sure that I know what I'm doing day in, day out. Otherwise, it would just be impossible, I think, for me.
Yeah. And is it any different for you, James? I know you guys obviously have different jobs and different lifestyles, but ultimately trying to achieve the same thing. Is your schedule mid-season look similar?
Yeah, it's pretty much exactly the same. I think the biggest thing is that you have to be adaptable. Like, you can't rely on routine too much, because you have to really be able to chop and change as required. And particularly, you know, if you talk about some of your pre-match preparation and stuff like that, sometimes, I know this last season I had a Monday game in where was it? It was in Darwin, I think. It was Thunderbirds and Lightning, and then I had the Friday fly out. So I had 3-day turnaround between matches, which I think it's definitely challenging for the umpires, namely because we don't have the physical training that the athletes do. Like, it's all self-driven. We don't have written programs. We don't get monitored loads. We don't have trackers on. We don't have anything like that. So whilst athletes are professional and they're training and they're doing things consistently, for us to try and maintain and be able to keep up with them, like, I'm 6'3". I'm not going to be able to move like Kelsey does. So, it's really about being adaptable and sort of realizing that you have to work to your strengths. Like, I'm 6'3", so I'm tall. So my positioning might be slightly different to someone else. But, as the game becomes more and more fast paced and more physical, and, we want to talk about it being a product and marketability and, create it interesting and stuff like that as well. We obviously have to consider athletes' welfare, and sometimes what we do as umpires comes across a little bit officious, I would say, but ultimately it's player safety and welfare that we need to consider. So the training that we put into that, we really just can't stop. So even though we're stood down at the moment, we're still required to train. We're still required because we really don't know, they could turn around and lift all the bans and stuff on travel for the next, in 2 weeks' time. And then we're like, okay, the season's starting on the 1st of July. And it's like, shit. But the other thing as well is the resources that are available to us. So we don't have the Collingwood gym, so we can't go and grab the weights and do all that sort of stuff. So it's definitely about being adaptable, and being able to coordinate and really just taking it all in your stride, because as much as you try and plan for these sorts of things, it never comes out that way. So
but even that, looking at your example of a three-day turnaround from a Monday game, that has to impact your work life as well. And I think that and netball is growing too from an athlete point of view in terms of the equal pay and the like of the development in that space. For umpires, it probably hasn't grown as much to allocate the flexibility around that time that you're required to take out. So have you had to increase the relationship with your full-time employers to be able to maintain your SSN status?
Yeah, I definitely have. I don't think I could ever take a job where they didn't support my passion for netball, because there is a lot of commitment that comes with that, and a lot of outside of work. And I'm fortunate in that respect that I sort of said very early on in the piece, I think it was probably like even in the interview, that these are my commitments. This is what netball season looks like for me. But it's not just high performance netball umpiring. It's, as it filters down into BNL, it filters into club netball and stuff like that. I'm sure everyone can testify that, you might have to do multiple games in a day, and how you prepare for those sorts of things is very different, to a standard game where you're having to do that. So, I think, for me, it's really about having a good relationship, being open and honest, transparent, understanding that, it is a difficult environment to operate in, but you do it because you're passionate about it, and that's ultimately why. So
yeah, hit the nail. Let's ease you into some of the netball specific questions, because we've got some curly ones in here. But Hillary's online, and she sent in a question: do you think that the level of contact/contest differs between levels, and if so, why? Also, in addition to that, why do you think so much is let go in SSN? Do you think you agree that the Diamonds then struggle in international competition because of that? So let's go part one. Sorry, there's probably 3 questions in the same one. You think that the level of contest differs between levels? If so, why? Tim?
I definitely think so. I think obviously the higher the netball, the stronger the bodies, the more training they do, and everything that they put into it. So obviously at SSN level, these athletes are training, 5-6 times a week. They're physically stronger. And, we try and allow, when we're out there, the athletes to show us their potential to its best. Sometimes we get that wrong, totally. And, I'm the first to admit that I've missed stuff and left stuff that should have been called. And then that's, there's a really fine line between, okay, is that contesting or is it actually interfering? And I suppose that's the thing that we have to look at, no matter what level that we're umpiring at, is the interference part. And, sometimes I find it challenging to go from doing an SSN game on a weekend back to VNL even on a Wednesday night, and the difference in body strength from players and, is that contesting or is it actually, interfering with what they're doing?
Yeah. The second question I'm going to throw to James. Why do you think so much is actually let go in SSN on top of what Tim was saying around letting athletes, show their full potential?
Yeah. Look, I think Timmy hit the nail on the head with his part. I think, so last year I took an interest in this area in particular. So as part of our pre-season high performance camp, I actually interviewed some of the athletes about this, one of which was Maddie, just to get an understanding and perspective, I guess, from an athlete as to, what they would like to see around contest let go. And she was she was really good when she said, very similar to Tim, that, they like the big contests almost. They like to be able to have a crack, and they like an umpire who will allow them to do that. I guess where the line is really around, I mentioned it before, player safety, and when it becomes no longer a contest and then it becomes much heavier. And I think we definitely teeter on that within SSN. And, the idea of that, does it result in injury or something? That's definitely something that plays on our mind when we take those considerations. But ultimately, it's about, allowing the players to showcase what they're capable of doing. But you need to be able to facilitate that, I guess. And, one of the things that we talk about in our umpire modules is around game leadership, rather than just facilitating, and really sort of taking a forward sort of step to be able to facilitate lead the game in a way that is, enjoyable for the athletes, enjoyable for the spectators, but also allowing safe contests. So,
yeah. And the third part I'm going to throw to you, Kels, because it is about the diamonds. Do you think the level of contact that is let go in SSN impacts the way that you guys play international level?
I don't think, number one, I want to say I don't think I would change it, because I probably agree with Madison and probably the discussions that James had with some of the players, that the contest is super exciting in SSN, and it is probably what makes us and the ability to be able to do that, and the ability of players that is showcased makes us the best league in the world. So I wouldn't change it, but I do think it has an impact. And I think the greatest example is the World Cup last year. It was quite interesting, and I voiced how I felt at the after party. Obviously around, we're used to having Australian umpires at SSN level who umpire and know how we play. And I would never, I don't think that, we got beaten by a better team, but obviously I think it took us a little while to adjust in games. It's only a 60-minute game, so you don't have a lot of time to find how the umpiring sits, or what that end's going to be like, you don't have a lot of time in that. Also, while you're trying to figure out what your game style is, what they're putting on, what they're doing. And I think sometimes it does take us a little bit of time to get our head around the umpiring, especially at World Cup.
Okay, I'm glad I got you to answer that, because one of the curly questions that came in for you was, describe a moment during a game where you really wanted to take the whistle from the umpire. And if it was from Tim or James, that's okay. Like, we're happy to be open.
Yeah, probably from me.
No. Gosh, I actually don't. I don't necessarily remember like particular moments. And I'm probably not the best person to ask you this, because I will always say that regardless of the umpiring, there is still opportunity to win, and whether they're calling everything under the sun one game and the other end isn't, and you happen to be in that end for the fourth quarter, you can adjust your style and your game plan to suit that. Like, it just is the way it is, and they're doing their job on the day. So that's how I feel about it, that whatever's happening, the team still has the opportunity to dictate what goes on. But I think the scariest one I had was Lightning versus Giants in, like, I can't remember if it was a semi. No, it wasn't a semi. I think it was the last round, 2018. And we're up by 11 goals going into the last quarter, and we won the game by 2. So I don't know what sort of happened. I feel like there was a couple of steps. I don't know. I do not know what happened, but I remember at that time being like, just bloody call time. I just want the game to be over. So probably not decisions, probably just more like, please someone blow the whistle and say this game's over. Yeah, it was stressful. 9-goal turnaround in the last quarter.
So politically correct of you.
Oh, I'm serious. So I honestly, I think I don't like players, and I'll say this, I don't like players, or I don't like teams or coaches that put it onto umpiring, because you have control of the game as well. Like, every team has control of what they put out there.
100%.
I'll say, sorry, as an aside though, I will say that in my experience, Nolene and Rob in particular really stand out as like coaches who actually want to work with umpires and have really good, robust and open discussions. And that's definitely something that I personally advocate for, because I think that's where most of the value comes from, those sorts of discussions. And, whether it's strategic or not, I don't know, but, it does really kind of affect the way in which you interact with those people. Because, if Rob's coming to you, he has a legitimate reason, and it's, worthwhile listening to. Same with Nolene as well. I remember, Giants versus Lightning, and it wasn't that game, but it was the first draw of last season, 2018. It was on the Sunshine Coast, and I had about an hour and a half discussion with Nolene and Kylie during the week with my co-umpire, and probably the most valuable sort of experience and feedback and stuff like that, and really kind of dissect why I made decisions and why things unfolded the way that they did, because it's insightful and it gives you the opportunity to reflect on those sorts of things. So just as an aside, I think those two in particular really stand out as two coaches who are pretty spectacular at that.
Sorry, can I just say from a play that what makes that so funny is they are the two coaches that have had, like, there is a no dickhead policy to umpires in both of those teams. So obviously 2 years at Lightning and my time at Collingwood so far, like, you talk back to an umpire, you even look sideways, you will hear about it. And I feel like that is because I think from their point of view, obviously when you're doing that, you're distracted from the game anyway. And also it's not nice. But there is just absolutely no dickhead policy when it comes to that. So it's interesting that you say that, because they do. Yeah.
Let's stay on that theme in regards to Suncorp umpires interacting with SSN clubs, because you speak about Nolene, you speak about Rob, then James. How much interaction do you have with SSN clubs? Do you attend their trainings? When you attend their trainings, how much involvement do you have? Timmy.
Oh, me?
Yeah, Timmy.
Yeah. So like quite a lot, actually. So I try to go to as many team trainings as I can. Often the times, with working full time is quite hard to get to, but when I'm there, there's a lot of interaction with the coaches. I'm always, talking to them about things that they might be looking at or working on with specific players. And then also, on game days, sometimes there is an opportunity just to have a brief, quick discussion with the coach, after a game, if they have a few questions or something like that. And that's happened a few times. But it's for me, it's all about building the rapport with the coaches as well as the players. And we're seeing these people so often, week in, week out, that anything that you can do to engage with the coaches for me is really good.
How much then, Kels, do you enjoy having the SSN umpires come into trainings, and how much do you invest in your relationship or your rapport with them when they are at your sessions?
I think it's a difficult one because you do want to build the relationship, but you also, and I'm sure the boys will say this as well, like there is that, like you don't want to overstep the line because at some point they are officiating a game. So I do find it a tricky one. But I also feel like we're all just humans and just a normal conversation is absolutely fine. I think I absolutely love having them in there, and probably not, I'm an attacker, and not that, like, it probably is much more beneficial for defenders with like their distance and maybe an arm, like a chicken wing or something like that. And I do know that our defenders get a lot out of when the umpires come. But my other favorite time when the discussions happen with umpires and players is maybe something that, and it could be before a game, that just checked our nails, like, look, this is, and it's almost like a theme of the game. I don't know, it's probably not called that, but like it's a theme of something that has maybe come out the week before. And this can be relayed during training as well. Maybe something that has come out the week before that they will be focusing on and that will be drawing attention. And I just think it's really good for players to understand that, like, okay, that's where that's coming from. And now that is where we stand as an umpiring group. And I don't know whether that's the way, it would be interesting to hear if that's the way that happens, but they obviously come in, they check our nails, and then they say, look, blah, 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 we're going to be focusing on tunneling. So as players, if you're going to tunnel, see you later. It's a really good thing.
Yeah. So if you don't get a lot of time to necessarily speak to umpires, do you find that your body language communicates and tries to build rapport with them, whether it is at the training sessions or in games?
Yeah. Do you mean me personally or as players?
Yeah, well, yeah, you personally,
yeah.
in terms of your body language, if you don't get that time to communicate with them verbally, you try to build rapport with how you react to certain calls or, how you interact with them during a game?
Yeah, I do. I feel like this group of SSN umpires at the moment have done an amazing job with probably opening up those conversation lines, because I do remember, and whether that was because I was a player that probably wasn't playing much a few years ago, I never would have spoken to an umpire, like speaking to an umpire would like, no, don't do that. So now I feel like those communications are much more accepted, and I feel like that has come from the umpires. Within a game, I do feel like you can, with body language sort of be like, yeah, no, I do understand that. And I do also think that there's a fine line between like, yeah, I get it, but I'm still doing it. And no, I genuinely understand what you're saying. And I want to try and rectify it, and then proving that you have rectified that. Yeah. I think there's a big difference in that. But yeah, you can within a game absolutely sort of create that eye contact, and just either with words or clarification. We're told not to speak to the umpires, but I feel like it's pretty good at the moment to be able to build that.
On the flip side of that too, just like for the umpires that are here and that, like, I always have a laugh with the players on the court. If they do something stupid or fall over or whatever, and they're like having a bit of a laugh and see that I've seen it, I'm the first one that always have a bit of a laugh and a giggle with them, because that kind of adds to it as well. You kind of, become a bit more relatable rather than just going, you're an idiot, and looking at them, in a weird way, or just totally ignoring it. I always love to have a laugh on the court with them.
And I'm sure, Kelsey, you can use your facial expressions to let the umpires know when they may not have made an accurate call.
Bobby's probably like, yes, I remember this one call. He called it out, and I looked at him like, are you joking? I didn't mean to, though. I probably got drilled by Nolene.
It was that same game. It was the same game. Yeah.
I feel like that was the only one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, funny question for James. Actually, we're going to get this answer from both. I'm going to just reword this slightly. What is one of the silliest things that you have done in an SSN match that nobody noticed? James, let's go with you.
That same game. That was a doozy for me. I called an so it was when they first kind of introduced a tactical timeout, and I remember there was a throw in, and it was a lightning throw in, and then Maddie McAuliffe called for a tactical timeout, and I said, sure, no worries. Then realised halfway through, hang on, it's not after a goal. Actually, no, you can't have it. Meanwhile, when I watch it back, the commentators are like, oh, so now we're going to a timeout, and they're just about to start the ads, and then they're like, oh, hang on, no, we're not. And I'm like, oh, no. And they're watching it back. I was going to be like, oh, this is going to be cringeworthy, and it did not disappoint. It was terrible.
So,
yeah, really bad. And then another one that Timmy and I had recently was down in Hobart for a preseason match, which was Magpies and Lightning. And we didn't realise that they weren't cutting to like ads and stuff in the break. So it was a timeout, and we're standing on the sideline, and they still had our mics on. And I always forget I'm wearing a mic. And you just hear me say something like, did Laura Shirian step in the pocket? And Timmy just goes, I don't know, I didn't see. And I said, yeah, I think I missed it. I've got no idea. And then the audio, and we're just watching the game back, and I'm like, oh, no. Yeah.
All right, so we'll cut those two clips out, and we'll send those to everybody as well, so you can see them.
Yeah. Well, I think
what a lucky charm.
Yeah. What Kelsey was saying about facials and stuff with the umpires, I definitely do the opposite too. If I make a clanger decision, I'm like, oh shit, that's wrong. I usually am very sympathetic when I'm telling the player to stand out of play. It's like, oh yeah, I think I got that one wrong. And usually if you've got good rapport, they'll give you a bit of a smile and be like, yeah, okay, I'm out of play. And generally it's accepted, but you've got to be careful. So.
Well, what about you, Tim? Silliest moment?
Mine's similar to what happened to us in Hobart, but it was actually on like a televised game, and I always forget that I'm mic'd too. And like I'm just standing there while the ball's down the other end, and like when players do really good passes, I'm like, oh yeah, that was good. But I like say it out loud, not just in my head. And I can't even remember what game it was, but you can faintly in the background hear me on broadcast going, oh yeah, that was really good. I'm just like, oh.
Who threw it?
I can't even remember, but it was, I can't remember what game it was on. I'll have to find it, but it was like it was a massive pass from just over the transverse into the goal circle. I'm like, oh, so good.
Now, out of everybody who's online, give us a thumbs up if you currently go through a video review process. Like, are you at that level where you're doing, yeah, so Rach does, Caroline does. Okay, so we've got a question, awesome. We've got a question in regards to the video process. So do you have any tips or advice to umpires who are either new to the video process or potentially not used to, I guess, receiving feedback in that form? Catherine, who asked this, said, I sometimes find myself overwhelmed with things to fix when watching myself on review. How do you guys get the most out of the review process?
James, do you want to answer that? Because then what I'll do is I'll talk about what we can do when we actually don't have access to video.
Yeah, sure. So I kind of break it into the simplest form. We have resources called Huddle, which is like you can replay clips and stuff like that. But I get the most value out of actually watching it on TV as opposed to cutting clips and doing all that sort of thing. Ordinarily, I will actually use the foundation of what I've been working on for that game. So usually we prepare in preparation for our game 3 or 4 things, you know, that we weren't happy with last week, or, you know, we've looked at our video from the previous week, or, you know, from our feedback from our umpire coaches or something like that. And I'll actually use that to form the basis of my review. So I'll actually say I'm not happy with my transition from sideline to goal line, which is a common theme. I will look at that as being kind of my starting point, because you're right, there are so many things to look at, but it's also a good reminder that there's so many things to look at when you're actually in the game. So it's being able to prioritize and say, okay, I'm going to break it down into its simplest form, and that's where my starting point is. And it's not a case of being able to try and absorb all the information like straight away. You might have to review a passage of play multiple times, put it on skip, look at it again, particularly if there's decisions which you're at the time, you feel in your gut, you know, I'm not so sure about that, I need to look at it again. Or you get feedback from your umpire coach, I'd just like you to have a look at this decision. So yeah, for me, it's simplest form, and it's about you know, what I've been working on for that game to build up from there.
Yeah, and I know that there's people here who don't have access to, obviously, you know, video footage, and we're umpiring at associations or competitions where they don't have like that stuff. For me, what I used to do is if there, because obviously on a Saturday or whenever we're umpiring, there sometimes are other umpires around that aren't umpiring. So I would always speak to them and go, okay, I'm just trying to work on these couple of things. Can you just have a look at for a half a game and see what you can see? You know, other umpires, if you ask them that, they're going to look at that specific thing and not give you all this information. The other thing that we can do is just video record, like even off your phone, the specific thing that you're working on. So say like if it's James and you're working on your transition from sideline to goal line, if you get them just to record that on your phone, you know, for a couple of passages of play, it's really useful just to watch it that way. So you don't need to have access to a full, you know, match review stuff.
Yeah, and just on that point as well, Timmy, in regards to, I guess, asking people for feedback, often we find when we're out in the netball space, whether it's coaches, players or umpires, they go, I'm not really sure, I don't feel comfortable in asking someone to help, because often they feel like they're going to be seen as too vulnerable, when really, I don't think anybody who is asked to help somebody else out is going to say, oh, I can't believe they're asking me for help. So, you know, the main point out of that is to have the courage to say, hey, do you mind helping me out in this situation? And even if it is only for 5 minutes, being vulnerable in that sense is going to help you develop. So, you know, really good point that you made there, Tim. Next question, and I'm going to ask one more to the boys and then I'm going to swing over to you, Kels. In terms of comments worthy of a caution, because I know we ran a workshop on Wednesday night and we spoke about the protocols that you have as umpires and the 4 protocols, starting off with the caution. How do you decide what comments are worthy of a caution for dissent and then what to let go?
Well, obviously if someone's swearing at you, then and this is a really hard one, because, and like we spoke about it in depth on Wednesday night, like Greg said, we had the thing. But, you know, there is a real fine line with this stuff. And I think what we kind of have to do as umpires is take into consideration the whole game that's in front of you and kind of read the play and the players and what's happening a little bit. So for instance, if, you know, you've got someone who is just got a bit of white line fever, they've only said it, you know, once or twice and it's been in random times, sometimes we just have to look at that and be like, oh, okay, well, they're frustrated at either they think the call's wrong or they're frustrated at themselves, and often that's what it can be. They're just frustrated that they are out of play or they didn't get the ball or whatever. I think when it starts to become a problem is when it becomes persistent. It's like one after the other, after the other, after the other. And you as an umpire have given that player enough opportunity to change their behaviour. So that's by using, a stronger whistle, a change of voice, different wording or something like that. So the player has an indication that they need to start to change that behaviour. If you've given that player enough opportunities to do that and they still don't, that's when we have to go into the next step, I think.
Yeah, and just in extension to that, or similar, Leilani's flicked through a chat question that's similar to that. Is there a signal for not in the spirit of the game, or is it straight up caution?
There's no hand signal. Usually, if it's not within the spirit of the game, we can find a rule that it comes under. Because I haven't ever called that myself personally. I don't know about you, James.
The only time that I think we used to call it was more around if you are signalling to an opposing team that, to pass the ball to me, and then they sort of do it because they're sort of responding to a call or something like that. That's the only time I've really called it. But you could also say that's intimidation the player into passing you the ball, really. So, there's a fine. Again, it's really about what the intent of the player is when you talk about not in the spirit of the game. But realistically, it falls along, other rules as well that you can penalise for.
Yeah. Okay, I'm cautious of time because I know when we first set this up, we were like, let's do a quick 30-minute Q&A with you guys, and we got us involved, and we've kept you guys until 9:23. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask one more question of Kels, and then we're going to do a bit of a plug for you as well. What's the most frustrating netball rule from a player perspective? Out of all the rules in the book, because there's heaps of them, the book's pretty thick, is there one that's frustrating for you to navigate around, or you maybe get pulled a lot for?
It's a pro and a con, I think, but the one that I find the most frustrating for myself would be an advantage call. And I know, sometimes I just struggle with advantage, and I probably look like a bit of an idiot that I don't know how to explain this.
Exactly what you're going to say, I reckon.
Do you reckon, so, yeah, okay, you say what you think. And
I think you're going to say the most frustrating call for players is calling an advantage break on a centre pass.
Well, that is frustrating because teams use it as a ploy now. So I was going to use that, but then I thought advantage, say for instance, it's an advantage contact or whatever because I am strong enough to take a ball with pressure on me. It still doesn't mean that then, if I have to do that for an entire game, then I am worn down by the halfway through the third quarter and I start making errors. That's still on me. I understand that, but it's probably a frustrating situation to think that there's players out there that would sort of, for want of a better word, take the piss in that advantage call. And the advantage doesn't actually go to you.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah, good answer. I think it is an interesting question in regards to, there are so many rules, and I think that's probably more of a personal question than it is a general question for
I'm sure defenders are like, obstruction is annoying.
It's so inconvenient.
I will say something very interesting about that, actually. So we had Rob Wright attend one of our high performance camps, and he actually brought with him, because he loves stats, a comparison from the last year of ANZ Championship to the first year of SSN. And sort of said, what do you think about this? Do you think that contact infringements were penalised more or less? And then so as a group, we were like, okay, we think more. We think less, blah, blah, blah. And he said, overall, I think the penalties that were penalised between ANZ and SSN had decreased by about 20%. Like, it was an astronomical amount of money, percentage. Yeah.
Money.
Yeah, it's money. Money.
Yeah.
And not so much for the fact of we weren't recognising decisions. It was more a case that there was more advantage applied, which I was like, wow, I did not even think about that. But that was really quite insightful. And then I actually thought, Kels, what you were going to say is when you have to play through an obstruction or something, when you're trying to get to circle edge or something to try and manoeuvre your way around the player, because I can imagine that's extremely challenging, and particularly those crafty wing defences are trying to keep you off the circle. So imagine that was probably what you were going to say. But I think from our perspective, it's all interpretive. It's not so much the rule. The rule allows for the fact that, you know, we can apply advantage on infringements, but it's really about, for us, our assessment of it and whether or not you have the opportunity to play through and do you have an option to go to. And I say it's interpretive because we're not experiencing it. We're not the ones who are having to consistently be hit, and we're interpreting how that is impacting players. So as you become more familiar and more experienced, you become better at those assessments. But as you have to understand, the players are the ones who are actually experiencing that as well. And I think you really have to have sympathy, I guess, from that perspective.
I think on that one too, like, and that's it can change, and that's where it does come down to interpretation, because one game I might be able to get to it's very contextual and it happens at different stages of the game that, like, oh, hang on, that might have been an advantage in the first quarter when I'm fresh and I'm able to, deal with having someone hanging off me. But in the fourth, like, it is very different. So that's why I did also want to say off that, as much as it is frustrating sometimes, advantage, I also love the rule because it makes the game quicker and I love a quick game. So it's like, I don't want to badmouth it because it is what makes our game so exciting sometimes.
And especially with the new changes to the advantage, or the ability for players now outside of the penalty to be able to pick up the ball and play on from that penalty. I think that's it's going to fasten up the game so much. The one thing I did want to say is, James, I hope you weren't picking on Kelsey's height when you referenced having to play through the obstructions to get onto the circle edge.
I was more talking about defenders who are short.
Okay.
Like, distance is short.
Sure. Okay.
But he is extremely short, so.
All right. Let's tie it up there. But before we do, Kelsey and Madison have an exciting new business venture, and I must admit, the boys were talking about it the other week, and I hadn't seen anything come out, and said, "Oh no, this is what it's about." And it's such a cool initiative for people to get involved in. Did you want to, give us a rundown of what it is?
Yeah, I just will say it quickly. So we obviously, came from isolation. We're obviously sitting at home, and as I said, I haven't really found a lot of time in isolation, but the first couple of weeks when we were a bit uncertain of what was going to happen, we thought, we get so many messages, and like, I don't want to sound like, I'm really popular, because I'm not, but I get so many messages from people asking, oh, can you do this, or like, I would love to talk to you, or like, can you answer these questions? And I feel like a lot of the time you end up conversing with people about stuff that I'm just as interested in. So we've started just this web page. It's so simple. We set it all up ourselves, where we've just offered sort of time periods where you can jump on and chat with us, and you can get us together, you can get us one-on-one. But I think the best thing, and I love the people that we've had at the moment have just been like, I had a 20-year-old boy the other day who doesn't really love netball, but just had followed me on social media for a while and liked me for a while and just wanted to talk to me about basketball and NBA. And we sat for 40 minutes and had a conversation. And we've done 2 of them now. And it's just, we know we're not psychologists or anything like that. We're just here to have a talk and answer anyone's questions about, or if they want to pick our brains. I had another one, a girl called me and was like, oh, tell me all about how you select music on your Spotify. And so it's been really interesting and eye-opening. People just want to talk, but I'm getting as much out of it as other people. So it's just a little thing that we're doing at the moment, obviously around opportunities for netball. We get paid a salary, which is lovely, but we're obviously missing out on opportunities to come out to netball clubs and associations and do appearances at the moment, and actually meet people face to face. So we thought, we would try and fill the void there. So that's what we're doing at the moment. Thank you for letting me talk about it. It's been really good so far, and I hope it continues on well past isolation.
Yeah, and that's called State of Two. And Kels has kindly volunteered her time for tonight. So what we are going to do is we're going to purchase a chat for a team, and we're going to put it out there, and we're going to donate that to a team out there. A, to support you guys, because we think it's such an awesome initiative, but B, to give a team the experience to chat to you guys, I think is, an opportunity that not everybody's going to get the chance to do. So we really thank you for your time tonight. Tim, James, you guys are amazing. We love having you part of Team Inspire, and I know this year's sort of been cut short for what we had planned, but we can't wait to see what the future brings with you guys in the umpire development space. So thanks for being a part of tonight.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks for coming along, everybody.
Thanks for dialing in.
And thank you to everybody who has been part of it, sent their questions in. We will post this up on socials so that everybody else can get an idea of what the chat was like as well.